Maya Rodriguez stepped out of her father's beat-up Honda Civic and stared at Jefferson High School's imposing brick facade. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard where clusters of students gathered, their voices creating a buzz that made her stomach twist with nerves. She adjusted her worn backpack straps and took a deep breath, the crisp October air filling her lungs as she tried to calm her racing heart. "You'll be fine, Mija," her father said through the rolled-down window, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel. Carlos Rodriguez had worked double shifts at the factory for months to afford their move to this suburban neighborhood, leaving behind the rough streets of East LA where Maya had grown up. "Remember what I taught you about standing tall?" Maya nodded, forcing a smile for her father's sake, even though anxiety gnawed at her insides. At 17, she had already lived in 6 different cities due to her father's job transfers, but each new school brought the same challenges. Being the outsider, the one who didn't quite fit in, had become her unwanted specialty. The school bell rang, cutting through the morning chatter like a knife. Students began streaming toward the entrance, their designer backpacks and perfectly styled hair a stark contrast to Maya's thrift store clothes and simple ponytail. She watched them move with the confidence that came from belonging somewhere, something she envied more than she cared to admit. Walking through the crowded hallways, Maya clutched her class schedule and tried to navigate the maze of lockers and rushing bodies. The walls were lined with trophy cases showcasing decades of athletic achievements, academic honors, and student council photos. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, while she felt like an intruder in their well-established world. Her first class was AP Literature, where Mrs. Henderson welcomed her with a kind smile and assigned her a seat in the 3rd row. Maya noticed the other students, sizing her up with curious glances, some friendly, others indifferent. She kept her eyes focused on her notebook, scribbling notes about themes in American literature while trying to ignore the whispered conversations around her. During lunch, Maya sat alone at a corner table in the cafeteria, picking at her homemade sandwich while observing the social hierarchies that seemed to govern high school life. There were the athletes with their Letterman jackets, the theater kids animatedly discussing their latest production, and the academic elite buried in their textbooks even during lunch break. She wondered where, if anywhere, she might fit into this complex ecosystem. The afternoon brought PE class, which Maya had been dreading all day. Coach Williams, a former college basketball player with a no-nonsense attitude, announced they would be running laps around the track as part of their fitness assessment. Maya changed into her faded gym shorts and an Old Navy t-shirt that had belonged to her older brother Miguel before he deployed overseas. As the class gathered on the track, Maya found herself standing near a group of girls who seemed to command attention wherever they went. Their leader was Chelsea Manning, a tall blonde with perfectly applied makeup even for PE class, whose father owned the largest car dealership in town. Chelsea's inner circle included Sarah Kim, whose family had moved from Seoul when she was young and who had perfectly assimilated into the popular crowd, and Jessica Torres, who, despite sharing Maya's Hispanic heritage, seemed to view her with obvious disdain. "All right, everyone, 4 laps around the track," Coach Williams called out, clipboard in hand. "This isn't a race, but I want to see effort and endurance. Pace yourselves and keep moving." Maya had always been a strong runner, a skill honed during early morning jogs with her father and the countless times she had to hurry between jobs to help support their family. She started at a comfortable pace, her breathing steady and controlled as her feet found their rhythm on the rubberized track surface. As they rounded the first turn, Maya noticed she was keeping up easily with the faster group, her form natural and efficient. Years of helping her father with physical labor and maintaining her own fitness routine had given her a lean, athletic build that was deceptive in its strength. She passed several classmates who were already beginning to struggle with the pace. Chelsea glanced back and noticed Maya gaining ground, her expression shifting from boredom to mild annoyance. "Who does she think she is?" she muttered to Sarah, loud enough for Maya to hear. "Trying to show us up on her first day." Maya tried to ignore the comment, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of her footsteps and breathing. Running had always been her escape, a time when her mind could quiet and her body could simply move without the complications of social dynamics or financial stress. The track stretched out before her, offering a brief respite from the anxiety of being the new student. By the second lap, Maya had moved into the lead group without even trying, her pace still comfortable while others were beginning to show signs of fatigue. She could hear Chelsea's breathing becoming labored behind her, along with whispered complaints about the heat and the unfairness of having to run so far. "This is ridiculous," Jessica panted, her face flushed with exertion. "Why do we have to prove ourselves to some new girl who probably thinks she's better than everyone else?" Maya's jaw tightened at the comment, but she maintained her steady pace. She had learned long ago that responding to provocation usually made things worse, especially when you were the outsider trying to establish yourself in a new environment. Better to keep quiet, prove herself through actions rather than words. The third lap brought more grumbling from behind her, and Maya could sense the growing resentment from Chelsea's group. She was torn between slowing down to avoid conflict and maintaining her natural pace, which felt effortless compared to the intense training sessions she had put herself through over the years. Her father had always emphasized the importance of discipline and perseverance, lessons that had served her well in every aspect of her life. As they approached the final lap, Maya noticed that several of her classmates were walking rather than running, their faces red with exhaustion. Coach Williams called out encouragement, reminding them that this was about personal improvement rather than competition. Maya appreciated the coach's approach, though she could still feel the hostile energy radiating from the group behind her. The final turn approached, and Maya maintained her steady rhythm while silently counting her steps and controlling her breathing. She had always found comfort in the mathematical precision of running, the way each stride could be measured and improved upon with practice and dedication. It was one of the few areas of her life where hard work always translated directly into results. Behind her, Chelsea was struggling more than she wanted to admit, her usual poise replaced by obvious discomfort. She had always been used to excelling without much effort, relying on natural advantages and social position rather than genuine hard work. Seeing this new girl, this outsider, make something that was challenging for her look effortless was more than just annoying. It was threatening to her sense of identity and status within the school hierarchy. "We need to do something about her," Chelsea whispered to Sarah between labored breaths. "She's acting like she owns the place, and it's only her first day." Sarah nodded, though she was too winded to respond verbally. The idea that someone could come in and immediately challenge their established order without consequence was unacceptable to their way of thinking. In their world, newcomers were supposed to know their place and work their way up gradually, showing proper deference to those who had already established themselves. As Maya approached the finish line, she felt a moment of satisfaction at completing the run with energy to spare. Her breathing was only slightly elevated, and she felt like she could easily run several more laps if required. She had always prided herself on her physical fitness, viewing it as one of the few advantages she could control regardless of her family's financial situation or social status. The rest of the class gradually finished their laps, with various levels of exhaustion and complaint. Coach Williams made notes on her clipboard, nodding approvingly at Maya's performance while trying to encourage the students who had struggled more with the distance. The afternoon sun had grown warmer, and several students headed immediately for the water fountains. Maya wiped her face with the hem of her t-shirt and was preparing to head back to the locker room when she overheard Chelsea talking to her friends near the track entrance. The words were deliberately loud enough for her to hear, a clear message wrapped in the guise of private conversation. "Some people just don't understand that there's a way things work here," Chelsea said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You can't just show up and think you can take over. There are consequences for people who don't know their place." Maya felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cooling afternoon air. She had heard similar threats before at other schools, usually from students who felt threatened by anyone different or capable. The pattern was always the same. Establish dominance early, make the outsider understand the social hierarchy, and ensure compliance through intimidation or exclusion. But Maya had also learned something else during her many relocations and challenges. Backing down rarely made the problem go away. Bullies typically interpreted submission as weakness, leading to escalated harassment rather than peaceful coexistence. Her father had taught her that respect was earned through strength and character, not through appeasement or surrender. The locker room was filled with the usual post-exercise chatter as students changed back into their regular clothes. Maya kept to herself, focusing on gathering her belongings and preparing for her next class. She could feel eyes on her, whispered conversations that stopped when she looked up, and the general sense of being evaluated and judged by people who had already decided she didn't belong. As she walked to her final class of the day, Maya reflected on the complicated dynamics she had observed. Jefferson High was clearly a place where social status mattered enormously, where established hierarchies were protected jealously, and where newcomers were expected to prove their worthiness before being accepted. It was a system she had encountered before, though rarely with such obvious wealth and privilege backing it up. Her last class was advanced chemistry, where she found herself paired with a quiet boy named David Shun for lab work. David seemed genuinely kind and uninterested in the social politics that dominated much of the school's atmosphere. They worked well together on their experiment, and Maya felt a glimmer of hope that she might find some genuine friendships among students who valued substance over status. "You're really good at this," David said as they balanced their chemical equations. "Did you take chemistry at your last school?" "Yep, plus my dad taught me a lot about problem solving and attention to detail," Maya replied, grateful for the normal conversation. "He always says that understanding how things work helps you figure out how to fix them when they break." David smiled at that, and Maya realized that there were probably plenty of students like him at Jefferson High. Good people who were just harder to notice among the louder, more dramatic personalities that seemed to dominate the school's social landscape. Maybe she could find her place here after all, if she was patient and strategic about it. The final bell rang, and Maya gathered her books for the walk home. Her father wouldn't be able to pick her up due to his work schedule, but she didn't mind the walk. It would give her time to process everything that had happened and plan her approach for the days ahead. She had learned that every new school was a puzzle to be solved, with its own unique challenges and opportunities. As she stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine, Maya noticed Chelsea and her friends clustered near the parking lot where expensive cars waited to take them home. Their conversation stopped as she passed, and she could feel their eyes following her progress toward the street. The message was clear. They had noticed her, evaluated her, and found her wanting in some fundamental way. Maya straightened her shoulders and continued walking, her father's words echoing in her mind about standing tall and never backing down from a challenge. She had survived worse than high school politics, and she would survive this too. What Chelsea and her friends didn't know was that Maya Rodriguez had been forged by experiences far more challenging than anything they could imagine, and she had no intention of being intimidated by teenagers who had never faced real adversity. The walk home took her through tree-lined streets where large houses sat behind perfectly manicured lawns. It was a neighborhood her family could barely afford, but her father had insisted on the sacrifice because he believed in the power of education and opportunity. Maya felt the weight of that sacrifice as she walked, knowing that her success or failure here would impact not just her own future, but her family's belief in the possibility of achieving their American dreams. As she turned onto her street, Maya made a silent promise to herself. She would not be driven away by mean girls or social hierarchies. She would earn her place at Jefferson High through hard work, determination, and the strength of character her father had instilled in her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with dignity and courage. The house was quiet when she arrived home, her father still at work, and her mother picking up her younger sister from elementary school. Maya sat at the kitchen table with her homework, but her mind kept drifting back to the events of the day. She had a feeling that her encounter with Chelsea's group was just the beginning, and she needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How was your first day, Mija? Remember, you're stronger than any challenge they can give you." Maya smiled and typed back, "It was good, Dad. I think I'm going to like it here." It wasn't entirely true yet, but she was determined to make it true. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. Maya Rodriguez had never backed down from a fight in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. Outside, the sun was setting over Jefferson High's affluent neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere across town, Chelsea Manning was already planning her next move, confident that the new girl would be easy to handle. She had no idea what kind of opponent she had chosen to make her enemy. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything Maya had learned about courage, resilience, and standing up for what was right. Her real education at Jefferson High was about to begin, and the lessons would be unlike anything she had experienced before. The next morning arrived with an unseasonable chill that matched Maya's growing unease about returning to Jefferson High. She had spent the evening thinking about Chelsea's veiled threats and the hostile looks from her group, preparing herself mentally for whatever challenges the day might bring. Her father had left early for his morning shift, but not before reminding her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was doing the right thing despite being afraid. Maya chose her outfit carefully, settling on dark jeans and a simple black sweater that wouldn't draw unnecessary attention, but still made her feel confident. She had learned that projecting strength often began with how you presented yourself to the world. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, preferring a natural look that reflected her practical nature. The walk to school took her past the same manicured lawns and expensive houses, but this morning they felt less welcoming and more like evidence of the vast economic gulf between her family and most of her classmates. Maya pushed down the familiar feeling of not quite belonging and focused instead on her goals for the day. Stay alert, avoid unnecessary conflicts, but don't back down if confronted directly. The hallways buzzed with the usual morning energy as students gathered at lockers and caught up on the previous evening's events. Maya noticed that conversations seemed to stop as she passed certain groups, replaced by whispered comments and meaningful looks. Word had apparently spread about the new girl who had outrun the popular crowd, and not all the attention was positive. Her first 2 classes passed without incident, though Maya remained hyper-aware of her surroundings and the various social dynamics playing out around her. She sat with David Chin again during lunch, grateful for his easy conversation and genuine interest in getting to know her as a person rather than evaluating her as a potential threat or ally. "You seem pretty athletic," David observed as they discussed their afternoon PE class. "Have you always been into running?" "My dad got me started when I was young," Maya explained, stirring her homemade soup. "He believes physical fitness is important for mental discipline too. Plus, it's been a good way to explore new neighborhoods when we move." David nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. I've been thinking about joining the cross-country team, but I'm not sure I'm fast enough. Most of the runners here have been training together for years." Maya considered this information, realizing that her natural running ability might have inadvertently stepped on more toes than she had initially thought. If Chelsea and her friends were part of the established athletic hierarchy, her performance yesterday might have been seen as more than just showing off. It could have been interpreted as a direct challenge to their status and identity within the school. The afternoon PE class arrived with an ominous feeling that Maya couldn't shake. Coach Williams announced they would be continuing with fitness assessments, this time focusing on relay races and team-building exercises. Maya's stomach clenched as she realized this would involve more direct competition and closer interaction with Chelsea's group. "All right, everyone, we're going to divide into teams of 4 for relay races," Coach Williams called out, consulting her clipboard. I'll be assigning teams randomly to ensure fair competition and give everyone a chance to work with different classmates. Maya listened as the coach read off team assignments, hoping she might end up with students who were focused on the activity rather than social politics. Her heart sank when she heard her name called alongside Chelsea Manning, Sarah Kim, and Jessica Torres. The coach seemed oblivious to the tension as she handed out relay batons and explained the rules. Each team member will run one lap around the track before passing the baton to the next runner, Coach Williams explained. The key is smooth handoffs and maintaining momentum. This is about teamwork, not individual performance. Chelsea approached Maya with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her voice artificially sweet as she spoke loud enough for nearby teams to hear. Well, looks like we get to work together. I'm sure someone with your obvious talents will help our team do really well. The sarcasm was subtle but unmistakable, and Maya recognized the setup immediately. She was being positioned as the person responsible for their team's success or failure, which meant any mistake could be blamed on her arrogance or incompetence. It was a clever social trap that would allow Chelsea to maintain her status regardless of the outcome. I'll do my best to contribute to our team, Maya replied diplomatically, refusing to take the bait or escalate the tension. What order do you think we should run in? Sarah stepped forward, her expression calculating. Well, since you're apparently so fast, maybe you should run anchor. That way, if the rest of us mess up, you can save the day like some kind of hero. Maya caught the underlying hostility in the suggestion, but recognized it as another setup. Running anchor meant she would be responsible for making up any deficit created by her teammates, and it would make her the most visible member of the team for both success and failure. But refusing would be seen as not being a team player, which could create even more problems. That sounds fine, Maya agreed, keeping her voice neutral. What about the rest of the order? Jessica volunteered to run first, followed by Chelsea, then Sarah, with Maya bringing up the rear. The arrangement meant Maya would have to watch her teammates' performance before taking her turn, which could be either motivating or incredibly frustrating depending on their effort level. As they lined up for the first race, Maya noticed other teams chattering excitedly about strategy and encouraging each other. Her team stood in relative silence, with Chelsea making occasional comments about hoping everyone would pull their weight and not let the team down. The message was clear. Maya was expected to compensate for any shortcomings, but would receive no credit for success. Coach Williams raised her starting whistle, and the first runners took their positions. Maya watched as Jessica started strong, but began to fade noticeably in the second half of her lap. Her form deteriorated as she tired, and by the time she reached Chelsea for the handoff, she was breathing heavily and moving slowly. Chelsea accepted the baton with obvious frustration, making a show of rolling her eyes at Jessica's performance before starting her own lap. Her form was better than Jessica's, but Maya could see she was pushing too hard too early, likely motivated by anger rather than strategic pacing. By the time Chelsea rounded the final turn, she was struggling significantly. Sarah took the baton, with Chelsea gasping for breath behind her, and Maya realized their team was already falling behind the others. Sarah's lap was competent but uninspired, her pace steady but not particularly competitive. As she approached Maya for the final handoff, their team was running in last place with a significant gap to make up. Maya accepted the baton with a quiet thank you to Sarah and immediately settled into the efficient rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Her long legs covered ground quickly while her breathing remained controlled, and she began closing the gap to the other teams almost immediately. The familiar feeling of her body working in perfect harmony was a welcome relief from the social tensions that had dominated her morning. As Maya rounded the first turn, she could hear Coach Williams calling out encouragement to all the teams, but she tuned out everything except the sound of her own footsteps and breathing. The mathematical precision of her stride, the controlled power of her movement, the steady rhythm that had carried her through countless challenges. These things were hers alone, immune to social manipulation or teenage politics. By the halfway point of her lap, Maya had closed most of the gap to the leading teams, her steady pace eating up ground while other anchor runners began to show signs of fatigue. She could hear excited shouts from the sidelines as spectators realized what was happening, but she remained focused on her own performance rather than the external drama. The final turn approached, and Maya found herself running alongside the previous leaders, her breathing still controlled while theirs had become labored. She had always been good at saving energy for when it mattered most, a skill learned through years of having to be efficient with limited resources. Now that efficiency was serving her well in a different arena. Maya crossed the finish line a full stride ahead of the second-place team, stopping smoothly and turning to watch her teammates' reactions. Jessica looked surprised and pleased. Sarah seemed grudgingly impressed, but Chelsea's expression was a mixture of anger and calculation that made Maya's stomach tighten with apprehension. "Nice job, Maya," Coach Williams called out, making notes on her clipboard. "Excellent comeback running. That's what teamwork looks like. Everyone contributing their strengths to help the team succeed." Other students gathered around to congratulate their team on the come-from-behind victory, but Maya noticed that Chelsea was accepting the praise as if it had been a group effort, while shooting Maya meaningful looks that suggested this conversation was far from over. The social dynamics were becoming clearer. Maya's athletic ability was making her a target rather than earning her acceptance. The next relay race was set up with different teams, and Maya found herself grouped with David Chun and two other students she didn't know well. The atmosphere was immediately different, casual, supportive, focused on having fun rather than proving anything. They finished third out of 6 teams, and everyone seemed genuinely happy with their effort and teamwork. As PE class wound down, Maya was gathering her things when she overheard Chelsea talking to a group of students near the equipment shed. The conversation was clearly intended for her to hear, another example of the indirect aggression that seemed to be Chelsea's preferred method of establishing dominance. "It's funny how some people think being good at one thing makes them special," Chelsea was saying, her voice carrying across the warm afternoon air. "Like they can just show up and take over without earning their place. But things have a way of working themselves out, you know? People who don't fit in usually figure it out eventually." The threat was unmistakable, though carefully wrapped in language that would seem innocent to any adult who might overhear. Maya felt a familiar surge of anger at the injustice of being targeted simply for excelling at something she had worked hard to achieve. But she also recognized the dangerous territory she was entering. This wasn't just about high school social dynamics anymore. This was about respect, dignity, and her right to exist in this space without being diminished or driven away. Maya finished changing in the locker room and was walking toward the school exit when she heard rapid footsteps behind her. She turned to see Chelsea approaching with Sarah and Jessica flanking her, their expressions serious and purposeful. Other students in the hallway seemed to sense the tension and began clearing out of the area or stopping to watch from a safe distance. "Maya, right?" Chelsea said, stopping just close enough to feel intimidating without being obviously aggressive. "We need to talk." Maya set her backpack down slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. Years of moving between different schools and neighborhoods had taught her to recognize when a situation was about to escalate, and every instinct she had was now fully alert. The hallway had grown quiet, with interested spectators pretending to be busy with their lockers while actually focused on the unfolding drama. "What did you want to talk about?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. Chelsea smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You seem like a nice girl, so I wanted to give you some friendly advice about how things work here at Jefferson. See, we have a certain way of doing things, and it's important that everyone understands their place in the community." Maya felt her jaw clench at the condescending tone, but she kept her expression neutral and waited for Chelsea to continue. She had learned that letting bullies reveal their full agenda before responding often gave her valuable information about their motivations and weaknesses. "The thing is," Chelsea continued, emboldened by Maya's silence. When someone new comes in and tries to show off, it disrupts the balance that the rest of us have worked hard to establish. People might get the wrong impression about who belongs where in our social structure. Sarah nodded in agreement, adding, "It's really for your own good. You don't want to make enemies on your second day, especially when you don't really understand how things work yet." Maya looked at each of them in turn, recognizing the classic intimidation tactic of using multiple people to make her feel outnumbered and vulnerable. But she also noticed something else. Despite their confident words, there was uncertainty in their body language. They were testing her, trying to determine how she would respond to pressure, but they weren't entirely sure of themselves either. "I appreciate your concern," Maya said finally, her voice calm and measured. "But I'm not trying to disrupt anything or show off. I'm just trying to do well in my classes and maybe make some friends. I don't think that threatens anyone." Chelsea's smile faltered slightly at Maya's composed response, clearly expecting more fear or defensiveness. "Well, that's good to hear. But actions speak louder than words, don't they? And some of your actions yesterday and today have been pretty noticeable." The hallway had grown even quieter as more students became aware of the confrontation. Maya could feel dozens of eyes watching her every move, waiting to see how she would handle this obvious challenge to her right to exist peacefully in their space. The moment felt suspended in time, heavy with potential consequences that would ripple through every aspect of her experience at Jefferson High. "I'm not sure what actions you're referring to," Maya replied, though they both knew exactly what this was about. "But I plan to continue doing my best in all my classes, including PE. I hope that's not a problem for anyone." Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a more threatening tone. "Maybe it shouldn't be a problem, but sometimes things happen to people who don't read social situations very well. Accidents, misunderstandings, that kind of thing. It would be really unfortunate if you got hurt because you couldn't take a hint." Maya felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest at the direct threat. This had moved beyond social intimidation into something darker and more serious. She thought about her father working double shifts to afford their life in this neighborhood, about her mother's hopes for her daughter's education, about her brother Miguel serving overseas to protect people's freedoms. The idea of backing down from these privileged bullies suddenly seemed not just wrong, but impossible. "Are you threatening me?" Maya asked, her voice remaining calm, but taking on an edge that made several nearby students step back involuntarily. Chelsea laughed, a sound without humor. "Threatening? That's a strong word. I'm just explaining how things are, helping you understand what happens to people who don't know their place." Maya picked up her backpack slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate. When she straightened to her full height, something had changed in her posture and presence that made the hallway feel charged with tension. Students who had been watching from the periphery began backing away further, sensing that this situation was about to become something more serious than typical high school drama. "Let me explain something to you," Maya said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly in the silent hallway. "I've lived in 6 different cities and attended 8 different schools. I've been the new girl, the poor girl, the outsider more times than I can count. I've dealt with bullies who were tougher, smarter, and meaner than you 3 could ever hope to be." Chelsea's confident expression began to waver as Maya continued, her tone never rising, but somehow becoming more intense with each word. "I've also learned that people who threaten others usually do it because they're scared of something. They're scared of losing their position, scared of being shown up, scared of discovering they're not as special as they thought they were. The question is, what exactly are you so scared of?" The hallway had become completely silent now, with students frozen in place as they watched this unexpected reversal of power dynamics. Chelsea opened her mouth to respond, but seemed unable to find words, clearly unprepared for Maya's calm confidence in the face of their intimidation. Maya shouldered her backpack and took a step toward the exit, then paused to look back at the 3 girls who had moments before seemed so threatening and powerful. "I'm going home now. Tomorrow I'll be back, and I'll continue doing my best in all my classes. If that's a problem for anyone, we can discuss it then." She walked away without looking back, her footsteps echoing in the silent hallway as shocked students slowly began to disperse. Behind her, Chelsea stood frozen with humiliation and rage, already planning her next move in what had now become a personal war. Maya stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, feeling both victorious and deeply worried. She had stood her ground and refused to be intimidated, but she knew this was far from over. People like Chelsea didn't back down from challenges, they escalated them. Whatever happened next would be worse than veiled threats and social pressure. As she walked home through the tree-lined streets, Maya began mentally preparing for the battles ahead. She had revealed more of herself than she had intended, shown that she was not the easy target they had assumed. Now she would have to be ready for whatever retaliation they might plan, because one thing was certain. This war was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Maya's confrontation with Chelsea in the hallway, and the tension at Jefferson High had been building like pressure in a boiling pot. What had started as typical new student hazing had evolved into something far more serious and dangerous. Chelsea's initial attempts at social intimidation had been replaced by a calculated campaign of harassment that tested every ounce of Maya's self-control. The attacks had been subtle but relentless. Maya's locker had been vandalized twice, once with cruel graffiti about her family's economic status, and another time with a substance that ruined her textbooks and forced her to spend money her family couldn't afford on replacements. Her lunch had been accidentally knocked to the floor multiple times, always when Chelsea's group happened to be nearby, with innocent expressions and fake apologies. During PE classes, Maya found herself excluded from team activities through a series of convenient mistakes and oversights. Equipment would go missing when she needed it, partners would mysteriously become unavailable, and Coach Williams remained oblivious to the systematic isolation being orchestrated by students who had perfected the art of appearing helpful while being anything but. The psychological warfare had taken its toll on Maya's academic performance and emotional well-being. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, unable to relax even during classes where she felt relatively safe. Her grades had begun to slip as stress and lack of sleep affected her concentration, and she had started eating lunch alone in the library to avoid the cafeteria entirely. Maya's father had noticed the changes in his daughter's behavior, but she had deflected his concerned questions with vague explanations about adjusting to a new school. She couldn't bear the thought of him knowing that his sacrifices to give her a better education were being undermined by cruel teenagers who saw her as an easy target. More importantly, she knew that involving adults would only escalate the situation and potentially put her in more danger. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon during what should have been a routine PE class. Coach Williams had announced they would be running a special fitness challenge that would count toward their semester grades, with students competing in small groups for the best combined time over a 2-mile course around the school's perimeter. Maya had been grouped with 3 other students: David Chun, who had become her closest friend at Jefferson; Amanda Rodriguez, a quiet sophomore who excelled academically but struggled athletically; and Marcus Thompson, a junior who was friendly but not particularly invested in PE class. It was a good group dynamic, with everyone committed to doing their best without the toxic competition that had characterized Maya's previous team experiences. The course took them around the school building, through a wooded area behind the campus, and back along the main road before finishing at the track. It was a challenging route with varied terrain that would test both endurance and adaptability, exactly the kind of physical challenge that Maya had always thrived on. For the first time in weeks, she felt genuinely excited about a school activity. As the groups prepared to start their runs at timed intervals, Maya noticed Chelsea watching her with an expression that set off every alarm bell in her mind. There was something different about Chelsea's usual hostile stare, a cold calculation that suggested planning rather than impulsive anger. Sarah and Jessica flanked her as always, but their nervous energy seemed more focused and purposeful than usual. "Good luck out there," Chelsea called out with false sweetness as Maya's group prepared for their start time. I hope nothing unexpected happens during your run. The woods can be so unpredictable, especially for people who don't know the area well. Maya felt her stomach clench with apprehension, but there was nothing she could do except stay alert and hope that her instincts were wrong. The course was well marked with bright orange cones, and there would be several faculty members stationed at key points to ensure student safety. What could really happen during a supervised school activity? Coach Williams blew her whistle to signal their start, and Maya's group set off at a comfortable pace that would allow them to maintain their speed over the full distance. David ran beside her, chatting easily about weekend plans and upcoming assignments, while Amanda and Marcus settled into their own comfortable rhythm slightly behind them. The autumn air was crisp and energizing, perfect for running, and Maya felt some of her stress begin to melt away. The first mile passed without incident as they circled the school building and headed into the wooded section of the course. The path was well maintained, but narrow, requiring runners to move in single file through some sections where overhanging branches created natural bottlenecks. Maya had taken the lead position in their group, partly because of her superior pace, but mainly because she wanted to ensure they didn't lose their way on the less familiar parts of the route. As they approached a particularly narrow section where the path curved around a large oak tree, Maya heard the sound of footsteps coming from behind much faster than their own group's pace. She glanced back to see three figures running hard to catch up, their faces partially obscured by the shadows of the forest canopy. Her heart rate spiked as she recognized Chelsea, Sarah, and Jessica approaching at a sprint despite having started their official run 20 minutes after Maya's group. "Maya, watch out!" David called from behind her, but his warning came too late. Maya felt a sharp impact against her left ankle as Chelsea's foot connected with precision and force, sending her stumbling sideways off the narrow path. The attack was perfectly timed and positioned to look like an accidental collision to anyone who wasn't paying close attention, but Maya knew immediately that it had been deliberate and calculated. Her momentum carried her several feet off the path before she hit the ground hard, rolling through fallen leaves and small branches that scraped against her exposed skin. Pain shot through her ankle and left shoulder as she came to rest against the base of a large tree. The wind knocked out of her lungs, and her vision momentarily blurred from the impact. "Oh my God, Maya!" Chelsea's voice carried through the woods with perfectly practiced concern. "I'm so sorry. I was trying to pass, and I guess I misjudged the distance. Are you okay? That looked really bad." Maya lay still for a moment, assessing her injuries while her mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. Her ankle throbbed with pain that suggested a serious sprain at minimum, and her shoulder felt like it had been wrenched badly when she hit the ground. But more than a physical pain, she felt a cold rage building in her chest as she realized how carefully this attack had been planned and executed. David reached her first, his face pale with concern as he knelt beside her. "Don't move yet. Let me check if anything's broken before you try to get up." Chelsea, Sarah, and Jessica had stopped their run and gathered around with expressions of manufactured concern, playing their roles as innocent bystanders to perfection. Maya could see the calculating look in Chelsea's eyes, even as she maintained her facade of worried helpfulness, clearly pleased with how successfully her plan had been executed. "We should get help," Amanda said, pulling out her phone. "She needs to see the nurse right away." "No need to panic," Chelsea interjected quickly. "I'm sure it's not that serious. Maya's tough. She's always showing us how athletic she is. I bet you can walk it off, right, Maya?" The taunt was subtle, but unmistakable, designed to challenge Maya's pride while maintaining plausible deniability about any malicious intent. Maya understood the game being played. If she accepted help or admitted to serious injury, she would be seen as weak and dramatic. If she tried to continue running despite being hurt, she could cause permanent damage to herself while proving Chelsea's point about her supposed arrogance. Maya pushed herself up to a sitting position, wincing as pain shot through her ankle and shoulder. She looked directly at Chelsea with an expression that made the other girl take an involuntary step backward, recognizing something dangerous and unforgiving in Maya's dark eyes. "You made a mistake," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying a quality that made everyone around her fall silent. Chelsea tried to maintain her innocent act, laughing nervously. "What do you mean? It was an accident. These things happen during athletic activities. No one's fault, really." Maya used David's offered hand to pull herself to her feet, testing her weight on the injured ankle and finding that while painful, it would support her. The shoulder was more concerning, but she had experienced worse injuries during her childhood in tougher neighborhoods where medical care wasn't always available. Pain was something she had learned to compartmentalize and work through when necessary. "David, Amanda, Marcus," Maya said without taking her eyes off Chelsea, "I want you to continue the run and finish strong. I'll catch up in a minute." "Maya, you're hurt," David protested. "We should all go back and get you medical attention." "I said I'll catch up," Maya repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Go." Her three teammates exchanged worried glances but recognized the authority in her voice and began reluctantly jogging away, looking back with obvious concern. Maya waited until they were out of sight before turning her full attention to Chelsea and her two accomplices, who suddenly seemed far less confident than they had moments before. "You wanted to see what happens when someone doesn't know their place," Maya said, taking a step toward Chelsea despite the pain in her ankle. "Let me show you what happens when someone makes the mistake of thinking I'm an easy target." Chelsea tried to maintain her bravado, but there was uncertainty creeping into her voice. "You're being dramatic. It was an accident, and now you're trying to make it into something it's not. Maybe you hit your head when you fell." Maya smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "My brother Miguel taught me a lot of things before he deployed with the Navy SEALs. One of the most important lessons was how to recognize when someone is trying to hurt you and what to do about it when it happens." The mention of Navy SEAL training caused a visible shift in the dynamics of the confrontation. Sarah and Jessica exchanged nervous glances, clearly unprepared for this revelation, while Chelsea's confident mask began to crack as she processed the implications of what Maya had just revealed. "I don't know what you're trying to prove," Chelsea said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Making up stories about military connections won't change the fact that you don't belong here." Maya began walking toward Chelsea with a predatory grace that made it clear her ankle injury, while painful, was not debilitating. Years of physical conditioning and mental toughness training had taught her to function through pain that would stop most people, and the adrenaline coursing through her system was providing additional strength and focus. "Miguel spent 2 years teaching me hand-to-hand combat techniques, situational awareness, and how to end a fight quickly and decisively," Maya continued, her voice remaining calm and controlled. "He said that bullies only understand one language, and that sometimes you have to speak it fluently to get your point across." Chelsea took an involuntary step backward, bumping into Sarah, who was clearly ready to flee the situation entirely. The confident predator who had orchestrated weeks of harassment was suddenly facing the possibility that her victim was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "You're threatening us," Jessica said, her voice shaking. "This is assault. We could report you." Maya laughed, a sound without humor. "Report me for what? Standing up after you deliberately tripped me during a school activity? I think any investigation would be very interested in examining the pattern of harassment you three have been conducting for the past 3 weeks." She continued moving forward, and despite their numerical advantage, all 3 girls continued backing away. Maya's presence had shifted completely from defensive victim to something far more threatening, and they were finally beginning to understand that they had chosen the wrong target for their games. "The thing is," Maya said, "my brother taught me that once someone escalates a conflict to physical violence, the rules change completely. You crossed a line today that you can't uncross. The question now is, how do we resolve this situation?" Chelsea's mask of confidence had completely fallen away, revealing the scared teenager underneath who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. We could just forget this whole thing happened and start over. Maya shook her head. No, that's not how this works. You made a choice to hurt me deliberately, and now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. Sarah grabbed Chelsea's arm, pulling her toward the path. We should go. This is getting crazy. But Maya moved to block their retreat, her injured ankle protesting but holding firm. We're not done talking yet. See, I've been thinking about this problem for weeks, trying to figure out a peaceful solution. But you three kept escalating things until someone could have been seriously hurt. My ankle could have been broken. I could have hit my head on that tree and been permanently injured. The fear in their eyes was now obvious, as they realized they were trapped with someone who was far more capable and dangerous than they had ever suspected. Maya's calm demeanor was somehow more terrifying than if she had been screaming or obviously angry. So here's what's going to happen, Maya continued. You're going to leave me alone. Completely alone. No more vandalism. No more harassment. No more games. You're going to pretend I don't exist unless you need to interact with me for school activities. And then you're going to be polite and professional. And if we don't, Chelsea asked, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. Maya's smile returned, cold and predatory. Then, my brother comes home on leave in 6 weeks, and he's very interested in meeting the people who have been making his little sister's life difficult. SEALs take a dim view of people who target their families, and they have ways of expressing their displeasure that stay within legal boundaries while being very, very memorable. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence, and Maya could see the exact moment when all 3 girls realized they were in over their heads. They had expected to deal with a scared new student, not someone with family connections to elite military special forces and the training to back up her words. Furthermore, Maya continued, if anyone else mysteriously develops problems with harassment or bullying this year, I'm going to assume it's connected to our little chat today, and I'll respond accordingly. She stepped aside, clearing a path back to the main route. Now get out of my sight before I decide that waiting 6 weeks for my brother is unnecessary. Chelsea, Sarah, and Jessica didn't need to be told twice. They practically ran back toward the school, their carefully planned attack having backfired spectacularly. Maya watched them go before allowing herself to acknowledge the full extent of her pain and the adrenaline crash that was beginning to set in. She began jogging back toward the track, her pace slower than usual but still steady and determined. The revelation about her brother's SEAL training had been true. Miguel had indeed spent his leave time teaching her defensive techniques and mental toughness strategies, though she had never expected to need them in such a direct way. By the time Maya reached the finish line, Coach Williams was timing other groups and making notes on her clipboard. David, Amanda, and Marcus were waiting anxiously near the track, their faces lighting up with relief when they saw her approaching. Maya, are you okay? What took so long? David asked, jogging over to meet her. I had to have a conversation with some people about appropriate behavior during school activities, Maya replied, her meaning clear to anyone who knew about the ongoing conflict. I think we reached an understanding. Coach Williams looked up from her clipboard with concern. Rodriguez, you look like you took a fall. Do you need to see the nurse? I'm fine, Coach. Just a minor stumble in the woods. Nothing serious. Maya completed her cool-down stretches and gathered her belongings, noticing that several students were watching her with new interest and respect. Word traveled fast in high school social circles, and it was clear that something significant had shifted in the complex power dynamics that govern student interactions. As she walked home that afternoon, Maya reflected on the events that had transpired and the way she had chosen to handle them. Violence was never the ideal solution to conflict, but sometimes the credible threat of consequences was necessary to protect yourself and others from those who refused to respect boundaries. Her ankle throbbed with each step, and her shoulder would need ice and rest to heal properly. But for the first time since starting at Jefferson High, Maya felt like she could breathe freely. The psychological weight of constant harassment and intimidation had been lifted, replaced by the quiet confidence that came from standing up for herself effectively. Her father was working late again, so Maya had the house to herself to process what had happened and plan for the days ahead. She knew that her confrontation with Chelsea's group would have ripple effects throughout the school's social ecosystem, some positive and some potentially problematic. But she had established herself as someone who wouldn't be pushed around, and that reputation would serve her well in the months to come. Maya called her brother Miguel that evening, using the satellite phone connection available to deployed soldiers for family communications. She told him about her school situation and how his training had helped her handle a difficult confrontation without anyone getting seriously hurt. "I'm proud of you, little sister," Miguel's voice crackled through the static. "You used your head and showed strength without losing control. That's exactly what I hoped you'd learn from our training sessions." "Thanks, Hermano. I hope I won't need those skills again, but I'm glad I had them when it mattered." The best warriors are the ones who only fight when they have to, and who end conflicts as quickly and decisively as possible. Sounds like you did both today. After ending the call, Maya sat in her quiet kitchen and worked on her homework, her injured ankle elevated and wrapped in ice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but she would face them as someone who had proven her ability to stand up for herself and others when necessary. The next Monday morning, Maya walked through the hallways of Jefferson High with a new confidence in her step despite her still tender ankle. Students who had previously ignored her now nodded respectfully or offered friendly greetings, while others simply moved out of her way with expressions of cautious respect. Chelsea, Sarah, and Jessica were nowhere to be seen during her morning classes, and Maya later learned they had all called in sick for the day. When they did return to school, their interactions with Maya were limited to polite nods and carefully neutral expressions, exactly as she had demanded. David Chen approached her during lunch with obvious admiration. "I don't know exactly what happened in those woods after we left, but the whole school is talking about how Chelsea's group suddenly lost interest in bothering you. People are calling you the Quiet Storm because you ended their harassment campaign without anyone seeing you actually do anything." Maya smiled at the nickname, thinking her brother Miguel would appreciate the military-style recognition. Sometimes the best victories are the ones where nobody has to get hurt, but everyone understands the consequences of their choices. As the weeks passed, Maya noticed that the bullying incidents involving other students also decreased significantly at Jefferson High. Her willingness to stand up to the established social hierarchy had apparently sent a message that resonated throughout the school, encouraging other victims to speak up and making bullies think twice about their targets. She excelled in her classes, joined the cross-country team, where her natural running ability was appreciated rather than resented, and developed genuine friendships with students who valued character over social status. The girl who had arrived as an anxious outsider had become a respected member of the school community through courage, integrity, and the quiet strength that came from knowing she could handle whatever challenges life presented. Maya Rodriguez had learned that standing up for yourself wasn't just about physical capability or family connections to elite military units. It was about having the courage to draw firm boundaries and enforce them when necessary. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not with fists or weapons, but with unwavering determination and the refusal to be diminished by those who mistook kindness for weakness. Her father noticed the positive changes in her demeanor and academic performance, though Maya never told him the full story of what had transpired that day in the woods. Some battles were meant to be fought alone, and some victories were best kept quiet. But Carlos Rodriguez could see that his daughter had found her place in their new community, and that was all that mattered to him. Years later, when Maya looked back on her time at Jefferson High, she would remember it not for the conflict and harassment, but for the moment when she discovered her own strength and learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be pushed around. The Navy SEAL training techniques her brother had taught her were useful, but the real weapon had been her own determination to stand up for what was right, regardless of the consequences. Chelsea Manning would go on to attend a prestigious private college where her family's wealth and connections ensured her continued success, but she would never forget the day she learned that some people cannot be intimidated or diminished. For the rest of her life, she would choose her battles more carefully, having learned that underestimating someone based on their background or circumstances could lead to very unpleasant surprises. Maya Rodriguez became the kind of person others looked to for strength and guidance, not because she sought power or control, but because she had proven herself capable of standing firm when standing firm was what the situation required. She had tripped, fallen, and gotten back up stronger than before, exactly as her father and brother had taught her to do. The new girl had found her place, not through submission or accommodation, but through the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone else define your worth. In the end, that was the most important lesson Jefferson High had to offer, though it wasn't found in any textbook or curriculum guide. It was a lesson written in courage, forged in conflict, and proven through the simple act of refusing to stay down when someone tried to make you fall.